Commission meeting. Oh, I'm hearing an echo. Is that?
Lisa and Ryan, if you could go ahead and mute, that would cut the echo for us.
Okay, take two. Welcome to the Chaska Human Rights Commission meeting for Thursday, November 19th. It's good to see everybody. And before we begin, I have to read our favorite thing, the statement, and then we'll get started.
Go ahead and mute, that would cut the echo for us.
Welcome, everyone. As you can tell, this meeting looks a little different. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are holding our meeting via video teleconference. Because the City Council has declared a local emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic, state statutes allow us to hold our meetings remotely. Even though we aren't meeting in person, we want to make sure the public can participate. If you have joined the meeting, you will notice that you are muted. We have a moderator on call who will unmute those who wish to speak during the public comment portions of the meeting. Public comments will be reserved for visitor presentation, public hearings, or special circumstances determined by the Commission. Once we reach those parts of the agenda, I will ask if there are any public comments. If you wish to speak and have joined the meeting by computer or tablet, please click on Participants on the bottom of your screen and select the raise hand icon. If you wish to speak and have joined the meeting by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. Once your hand is raised, the moderator will announce your name and unmute your line. Please remember that public comment is provided at the discretion of the Commission and is meant to provide productive discourse on topics related to the City of Chaska. Speakers shall refrain from comment or behavior that is deemed disorderly, derogatory, obscene, indecent, or off topic. Any person engaging in such speech or acting or action may be muted or removed from the meeting. Those of you who are watching online or on Comcast Channel 15, please be aware of the following. Some of our commissioners, city staff, and presenters are participating in the meeting remotely. There is a delay between the live meeting and the broadcast, and all commission actions will be taken by roll call vote. We are working hard to make sure you can be heard as we protect everyone's health and safety. Thank you for your patience as we work through this unprecedented situation. Okay, so that's done. We can start off now with Nate calling the roll, please.
Yes, Commissioner Welvert.
Here.
Commissioner Bean.
Here.
Commissioner Haga.
Present.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Dunbar.
Here.
Commissioner Spreadberry.
Here.
And Commissioner Carlson is absent. Sounds like she may join later.
Okay. Thank you. We got the agenda sent out to us earlier this week, and if everyone's had a chance to read through it, then do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved, Haga.
Seconded.
Okay. Thank you, Seth. All right, all in favor of adopting the agenda? Nate, do you want to read out roll?
Yes. Councilmember Bean.
Yes.
Councilmember Haga.
Aye.
Councilmember White.
Yes.
Councilmember Dunbar.
Yes.
Councilmember Spreadberry.
Yes.
Looks like Councilmember Carlson has joined us, so I will request your vote as well. And this is to adopt the agenda. You're on mute, so you need to unmute yourself. Commissioner Carlson, I don't know how, you're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Welbert.
Yes.
All right, that's unanimous vote to adopt the agenda.
Okay. It's been a lot of work and we're just getting started tonight.
Keep motoring through.
Okay, let's move on to item 3 on the agenda. We have open forum guest presentation. And this time we actually have a guest scheduled for tonight. Police Chief Seibert is here to get to know the commission. I did meet with him earlier this summer, I think it was. We were outside and it was beautiful. But, you know, we talked about that we would love to just get to know him and find out what kind of vision he has for the city of Chaska, but also how we can work together and have a relationship between the commission and the police department in our community. So with that, I'd like to welcome Ryan and thank you for coming tonight.
And thank you for having given me the opportunity to come here and at least virtually meet with the rest of you that I either haven't met with or don't know. So very much appreciate that. And one, I must apologize if you hear any kids in the background or if we have a guest. My 4-year-old daughter likes to join in sometimes on these Zoom meetings. So my apologies in advance. And please, if at any point in time you have a question, if there's anything you want to add to any of the items that I'm going to mention, please do so, because what is very important to me and will become clear kind of when I go through these items is collaboration and bouncing ideas off of others. And I think the Human Rights Commission is a very good opportunity to do just that. So what I envision here tonight is just to lay out some of my initial thoughts or plans as it relates to the police department and maybe some of the strategic planning that we could see initiating here within the next 6 to 12 months and beyond, and go through again some of those items that I foresee. And then I'd also like to go through and discuss kind of a high-level summary of the community conversations that we've had both in person and also virtually. And what I mean by a high-level summary is just it's truly a compilation of a lot of feedback that we've received, and I've tried to put them into some key categories. And I think quickly you'll see some connectedness between some of the planning elements and some of my priorities with what we're hearing in the community. And of course, that builds into feedback that hopefully you either have tonight, or if you contemplate it moving forward, I certainly would encourage that conversation as we move forward. So for those of you that don't know me, again, my name is Ryan Seibert, and I've been the chief here in Chaska now for just about 8 months. And in some regards, it feels like it was yesterday, and sometimes it feels like it was 10 years ago that I started. And I think it's just truly a sign of the time that we live in with COVID and some of the other challenges that we're facing. Prior to working here in Chaska, I was with the Robbinsdale Police Department, which is a first-ring suburb of Minneapolis. And I had a kind of an unusual career at the police department there, getting involved very early in essentially a community partnership role, which kind of steered the course of my career, and learned very early in my career the importance of working with the community and being engaged in identifying key stakeholders in the community and trying to find ways that we can best co-police. And what I mean by that is listening to and talking to residents, business owners, others in the community, and hearing what their priorities are and working together towards a public safety mission. So when the job opened in Chaska, it very much was congruent with a lot of my priorities that I had implemented in Robbinsdale and my career development up to that point. And what really interested me or motivated me to become a candidate for the position was just the strong sense of community identity that I believe Chaska has, and having the ability to help further that mission with the police department. So just a very quick background on me there. Personal life, I live in Chanhassen with my wife and our 2 kids. So I'm just across the border. I'm your neighbor. So but
I
enough
meant to hold
about-
that against you, Chief.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Enough about me, unless anybody has any questions. But again, just to kind of set the table for any external police chief, it's very important to come in and obviously get to know the staff, do a full analysis of the policies and the procedures and kind of how the police department operates. And that's something that I'm still continuing to do today. But obviously with COVID and some of the other calls for police reform and things that we've seen over the past 8 months, it's been a very unusual way to transition. So it's the same type of analysis has occurred. It's just transpired in a little different manner than probably what I would have done if those variables hadn't been thrown in front of us. But that said, with the Chaska Police Department, I'll kind of go through the elements as I see them in the department, but somewhat just high level, what my priorities are in the community is, I mentioned this, but number one is to evaluate the policies and the procedures of the agency. And coming in the door, I can tell you both, we're in a very good spot compared to other agencies. So there was a great deal of call for reform as it comes to police policies, both in Minnesota and across the country. And the vast majority of those were already implemented in the Chaska PD. And the training programs, specifically with use of force, was very spot on when it comes to the types of trainings that have now become prohibited by state law, and just the mainstream best practice expectations when it comes to training is something that I already found existing within the agency. Of course, there were some policy elements that changed, and a lot of that was mandated by state law and the post board that oversees law enforcement in the state. But I found both of those areas very much to be in a very healthy spot. The other component that I think is critical for our department, as with any other, is officer wellness. And this is, I would say, something that has been progressing and has been evolving over the past, let's say, maybe 5 to 10 years in law enforcement. And we're bringing a greater degree of formality to this as we speak in Chaska. I think overall, the officer wellness is in a good spot in Chaska. And when I came in the door, I think it's a very motivated group of officers. I think the camaraderie is in a good place. But what I mean by bringing more formality is we have sent a number of officers to what is called a peer support training program. And essentially what that entails is having officers that are trained to recognize maybe any warning signs that we might see in some of their peers, any type of stressors, and just act as that support arm to their peers. So if there's a way to help, just basically get somebody to talk if they're going through a hard time in their personal or their professional life. So that's one component that we've looked at, and that is continuing as we speak. And then also working with our police chaplains, which are faith-based individuals in the community from different denominations that volunteer their time to the police department and the community. And predominantly their historical role has been to assist community members if there's a death notification or some type of a tragic scene that might impact their direct family members. A chaplain can be a very good bridge to help the family in law enforcement and help with folks that are grieving. But we are looking at currently perhaps ways that the chaplains could serve in a different role and help our police officers, again, just trying to get resources to the table, perhaps somebody for the officer to talk to and just try to increase that comfortability if the officer themselves is facing some type of challenge in their life. So obviously we have that mental health component, but then also physical health is another key component that we have to look at with officer wellness. And I found the department in a very good place. coming in the door, I think far ahead a lot of other departments. And what I mean by this is allowing officers a time duration throughout the week where they can work out on duty if our staffing allows it. And I think, the physical benefits speak for themselves, but it also gives a mental break, I believe, to the officers. So, there's times in this profession, I think there's very unique stressors that can sometimes become cumulative for some individuals. And I think it's critical that police officers, EMS, fire, they find healthy outlets to deal with that stress. And I think giving officers that break, like I said, when our staffing allows, is very beneficial to officer wellness. So obviously I've talked a lot about that. It is deserving a lot of attention, but I want to keep moving forward. Another component that is critical to me is engagement in the community. I did mention that is a kind of a staple of my professional background. And my analysis of this coming into Chaska is, again, the community engagement historically has been very strong. We're very fortunate to have Julie Jenke, our community partnership officer, who does fantastic things in the community. And it takes the form of, things that are very commonplace in a lot of departments, such as neighborhood watch, the night to unite. Those are commonplace, but there also are things that are very unique and very special, I believe, for our community. And fishing with friends is an example that comes to mind. In the COVID times, Julie has been doing a lot of work with the senior communities and making sure that, as a city and as a police department, we're doing everything that we can. And that can take the forms of getting meals delivered to seniors. Also taking a look if there's a way that the police department can partner with the Chaska Cares initiative, taking a look at the mental health of seniors that may now be isolated, especially going into the holidays. And I could go truly on and provide a list. But so what I'm getting at is the engagement piece with the community is very strong. That said, I do have some plans strategically moving forward, and I'm hoping to find a way to increase the engagement element with all of our staff, even more than it is today. We do have a very good reception on the part of our police officers to go and assist Julie, or to get out of their squad car and engage with kids, or whatever kind of spontaneous chance that they might have to do that. I think they do an exceptional job. But over time, I hope that we'll be able to add staffing to the police department, and not just for the reasons that you might think, in response to crime patterns and proactive enforcement, but to reduce the overall allocated time that officers have each day to calls for service and other priorities. And what that does is it frees up more of their time to engage with the public, to take part in different community initiatives. If there's partnerships that we could forge with Park Rec and some different recreational programs, perhaps trying to involve some of the different youth in the community, maybe working further with the school district to try to start some new initiatives. So that's something that obviously is ongoing. It's directly tied to the fiscal situation, the economy, but I am optimistic that as the city grows and the police department grows, it'll be more than just a visibility and an enforcement element. It will have that engagement piece as well. Another thing that's important to me is, and I'll get into a little bit more of this when I talk about our agency core values, but as a leader within our department, making sure that, again, this kind of goes into a cultural element, maybe a little bit with officer wellness, but what I would basically call making sure that we have a brand, quote unquote, in our police department. And what that means is those are things that are marked by traditions in an agency. And that could be something as simple as when we have a new officer that starts and we do a swearing in program to give that new officer a chance to meet key city staff, meet some of the other officers, maybe have their family present to meet the officers, and just create a structure of community. And then also I could envision in a non-COVID world, inviting city council members, perhaps members of the Human Rights Commission, if you were so interested, and just give this sense of community. Like I mentioned, something something greater. And there's other, ways that this can be done in a law enforcement agency, but what makes our agency special and what makes it distinguished amongst others, which has a direct connection to recruitment and retention and other elements. So that's another component. And I mentioned already a little bit about co-policing, but this is my last priority that I was going to mention, and it ties hand in hand with the overall philosophy. So what I am looking at, and this is something that we do every day in law enforcement, certainly here in Chaska, but I want to codify this in a more formal manner, is introducing basically problem-solving policing. And again, we do this every day, but in also the co-policing element, which relates directly back to community engagement. And this could take the form most commonly if we attend a community meeting, which usually involves some kind of a concern that's festered to the point that a representative of our department has been requested to come out, speak with a particular neighborhood or different neighborhoods, and how do we come up with some kind of a equitable solution to that problem. So I think that's a direct connection to co-policing, and then also problem solving, because I firmly believe that there's not a law enforcement agency anywhere in the country that can arrest or cite their way fully out of problems. You have to have that problem solving approach. So where this becomes critical is, as a department, and again, recognizing that we're right in the middle of a pandemic, what I hope to embark on here within the next couple of months, and it's going to have to be virtual, is strategic planning for our department. And kind of the way I'm going to ground this is this notion of problem-solving based policing. And I'll go through a kind of a list of a few other items, but instead of me as the chief sitting down maybe with the command staff and coming up with the strategic plan for, let's say, the next year, 5, 10 years, I want to involve everybody in our police department that's interested in coming down and sitting at the table to discuss this. Because, of course I could set out and I could make these initiatives and set our full strategic plan, but I think there's a better chance of it being received better, being more thorough by the officers of the department that work the street. They know the community, and getting their support in this process. And that's also something that I can envision bringing back to the Human Rights Commission and discussing kind of what we're looking at for a strategic plan in whatever form that might take. Some things that come to mind is just taking a look at our overall service models as an agency, taking a look at what engagement might look like. How do we involve more of the community and be more inclusive? And how do we identify and sustain additional community involvement? And then also, what do our proactive services look like? Traffic enforcement, just all the keys of public safety, and trying to involve as many members of our department as we can. So that said, I don't want to go through and read verbatim our mission statement, vision, or core values. They are on the website, or I can email them to you if you'd like to see them in detail. But the core values, when I came in, these are 4 core values that I established. And what I hope to do as part of the strategic planning is just kind of use this as a basis to move forward. And how are we going to set our priorities? How are we going to plan for the future? And our values, number 1 is respect. And I'll paraphrase a little bit of this, but recognizing that we hold life in the highest regard and we treat everyone with dignity and respect, and recognizing that it's our duty to earn the public trust through consistency. The second is responsiveness, which lays out, as an organization, we're committed to meeting the needs of the community and recognizing that each member of our community might have different needs, values, and perspectives. So responsiveness is a very big one to me because it takes many different forms. And I also think it is variable from one individual and one call to the next. The third is professionalism, and just holding our staff to the highest possible professional standards, using the best practices in law enforcement, and then setting goals to help our organization grow, both individually and also collectively as professionals. which ties hand in hand with the need for strategic planning. And then lastly, leadership. And I think in any organization, a leader is everybody from, the entry level employee to the leader at the top. And I think especially in law enforcement, everybody should be a leader. So again, taking each of these core values and trying to implement these and looking at our strategic planning through that lens is so, for instance, if we take a look at our service models, what should our shift minimums look like? How are we going to allocate those folks? And then look at it through that lens. I think it will be a good mechanism to go through and review our services and hopefully plan for the future. So again, I think you'll see some connectedness to this next portion that I'm going to discuss, because it to a certain degree has steered some of my thinking. But again, this is a high level summary of our community feedback that we received. And some of this has come through the mail. I believe to date, we've received about somewhere between 600 and 700 responses to the mailer that was sent out a few months ago. And then also it reflects our virtual and in-person sessions that we've had. So in no particular order, there was a lot of commonality in responses that emphasized the importance in hiring with the department. And I won't say the responses were all over the board, but one of the key themes was retention of employees, recognizing that it is a challenge right now in public safety everywhere in the country to recruit and retain candidates. So retention, I think, ties in directly to some of the elements that I discussed earlier, that officer wellness piece. It also ties in directly to the traditions of the department that I mentioned, or the brand. But also I'd say of equal or greater importance, or how are we ensuring that we are bringing in a diverse and qualified candidate pool, was something that seemed to be a predominant theme. And I don't have a 100% catch-all answer on how to become an agency that's more appealing to individuals from a diverse background. I have some ideas. I don't know if you've heard about the Pathways to Policing, which is a type of employment program that's been used in some parts of the state, which essentially advocates or allows an individual with a minimum of a 2-year associate's degree in any background to be hired by an agency. They have to pass a criminal background check, but once that is done, then the municipality or the organization that hires them pays for them to go to what's called a certificate program for law enforcement. So that provides the required academic components by state statute, and then also provides the practical skills program that's required by these programs. And then that individual can take the post test, which is the Peace Officer Standards and Training Test, which can ultimately lead to licensure as a police officer. So the strengths of this program, it could be attractive to an individual that perhaps set out in life to get a different type of degree, had a family, had kids, and may not necessarily be in a financial situation where they can just quit their job and go back to school. And the argument is you bring in and you attract candidates from diverse backgrounds that maybe just didn't necessarily set out in life to pursue law enforcement. So that's another option. Another possibility when it comes to increasing diversity is to try to seek out some of the different police officer associations that exist. And there's a Latino Police Officers Association. I also believe that African American, I forget if that is just through Minneapolis, but there are some different officer associations. And what's important to note there is I've found that officers from different racial or ethnic backgrounds tend to gravitate to areas where they feel that their race is represented in that community significantly. So you see this quite a bit in some suburbs of St. Paul. You'll see Metro Transit Police Department, Minneapolis Police Department, and some of the officers that I've worked with in the past have even confirmed this to me. Just it's a sense that they understand the culture and the traditions of the people, and they feel like they can make the greatest difference in those areas. Or word of mouth. They might know folks that already worked there, they went to school with them, and they feel comfortable. And I think we need to increase in both of those areas to the best of our ability. So again, I have a lot of ideas kind of packed in my head when it comes to hiring and ways that we can attract more candidates. The other, and again, it ties in somewhat directly to this as well, is the overall interest in increasing officers that might be bilingual. So we do have a few members on our staff, one sworn officer, one member of our support staff that do fluently speak Spanish. But again, it was highlighted that there's an interest to increase that. And then also an overall desire to, in a written correspondence, to translate some of our information, some of our documents into multiple languages, which is something that we did for our mailer that went out, and some other documents that we've produced. We've translated those into a couple different languages. A very important one to me also, that came up as a very much a continued theme, is community engagement, and breaking that down, engagement with youth and the whole community. And a lot of folks recognize that the robust positive engagement that the department already has, but would also like to see things expanded. And how do you reach out and attract engagement with more segments of the community? And I 100% support that. But I've always found a challenge in sustaining that involvement. It seems that there's usually some kind of an issue or a temporary priority that brings people to the table. And when that evaporates, well, so does the attendance. So again, I think there's some area there for growth, but I think it transcends outside of just the police department. And I think that's where bringing other stakeholders to the table, whether that's another city department, it's this commission, or maybe, some other element I haven't considered, is how can we best market a community meeting, or how can we best market an initiative, and how can we get more people to the table? I think the youth element is easier because we have the school district, we have the community center. I think there's some programs that we could put together there, but how do we bring more people in is definitely a challenge, but it's worth tackling that issue. Another that was very prevalent was safety in the community. And some of the themes here were, there were some that desire more of a police presence. They said they felt comfortable when they saw them in their neighborhood. There were some that said they're not comfortable when the police are in their neighborhood, but they want to feel safe. Well, there are a lot of responses that they'd like to see more traffic enforcement on 41 and some other areas of the community. And a lot of just responses, they want to feel safe in town. There were some references to potential narcotics problems, finding needles in some areas. So safety was a very predominant theme that kept coming up. And, maybe I could have included this in my planning piece that I talked about, but, when it comes to some of this, I do have some initiatives, some different types of positions that we potentially, hopefully, will staff in the future. And one of those includes the drug task force, which is a consortium of officers from multiple agencies that is dedicated to those type of narcotics and issues that we see stemming from it, such as overdoses and things like that. So safety, again, was a big theme. Another one that was very prevalent was officer training, and some of the highlights there. Use of force, obviously, is a very significant one. Making sure that our use of force training is mainstream and is based off of current expectations and current state law. And if I seem tired tonight, it might be I was in use of force training this afternoon. And I'll be honest with everybody, I'm a desk sitter and a paper pusher now. It is fun to get out and go to training, but a very large part of me wanted to see what the use of force training looks like for our department. And I did some when I initially started as well. And I can tell you, based on my past experience, that what's being instructed is definitely mainstream. And these were things that were implemented before the state law had to change. We don't use chokeholds. They didn't use those in the past. I think it's very practical training, and a lot of it is based on ensuring that we're providing the best possible outcome. So, whether it's scenario based, we're trying to implement de-escalation or crisis intervention. I think all of those are components of our overall training. Another that came up is the need to emphasize crisis intervention training. So we have a number of officers now that have been through the 40-hour CIT, if I use that acronym, crisis intervention training. And I hope to expand that to all of our staff over the period of the next couple of years to get them through that 40-hour course, which is, if you will, kind of the gold standard for law enforcement to be able to use those intervention techniques for people that might be in crisis. And then beyond that, vast majority of our staff have been through either an 8-hour or some other type of variation of that CIT training. A very large and significant theme is just overall response to mental health and what kind of training our officers can be in, and recognizing folks that might be on the autism spectrum or some other type of disorders out there, and how best can we respond to those individuals just in their daily lives or if they're in crisis. So that was a very big theme that I think relates directly back to crisis intervention training. But again, that would be another area that we'll explore to see if we can expand our training opportunities. And then also implicit bias and diversity training was another significant one. And prior to my start, the city did launch an initiative and teamed up with the YMCA Diversity Institute. And at that time, at least every employee in the city, and Nate will probably know, I think that was in 2019 that the city did that training, and that was mandated for all city staff. But there are absolutely a lot of other types of implicit bias training and diversity training that we could see implementing as well. Another one, and I kind of paraphrase this, but there were a lot of responses when it comes to customer service. And I think this relates directly back to a few of our core values, but specifically respect, responsiveness, and professionalism. So I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but essentially what the community expects is when they call, they want a response, and not for the officers to assume anything. The public, it was quite common, said, don't expect that we understand the process. Please explain this to us. What can we expect? And that's one thing I always remind officers, is that you have to remember that, the public we serve, they may call the police once in 20 years. And how we act and what our professionalism is like will be the perspective that that individual forms. So I think it's paramount that we have a good customer service model. And when we don't, I think that's why it's very important to have an available and accessible complaint process. And even if at the end of the day, it doesn't result in a full-blown investigation into what happened, maybe it was just unprofessional, that's still stuff that we need to know about so we can improve. And I recognize that, any of us or our staff, we can have a bad day, but if it becomes a theme or a pattern, that's definitely something that we need to know about. So customer service did come up as a key attribute as well. There were a number of responses and discussions as it comes to some form of an advisory group. And in the early stages of our community conversation, we were meeting quite regularly with a core group, advisory group, if you will, and just kind of going through some of the ideas and in ways that we might want to approach things. And with COVID, these in-person groups have somewhat disintegrated. But again, I think that there is room for growth in this area, whether it's an advisory group that maybe has an issue that they want me or somebody else from the police department to discuss, or maybe it comes from the other side where maybe I have an issue or some sort of proposal that I would want to present and get some ideas from the community. I see a great deal of benefit in some kind of advisory capacity, and perhaps that could even come from the commission if you'd be so inclined in the future. Because I do, like I said at the very beginning, I appreciate collaboration and honest feedback. So probably more to come on that, but there's always definitely things that will come up. Another that was a very strong theme throughout the different conversations was the need for transparency. And one of the biggest was body worn cameras, and just the sense that the community was glad that our department has body cameras. So that again was a big theme. A lot of folks said have them on all the time. Yeah, and there were some comments that kind of deviated a little bit beyond state law, data privacy, because there are a great deal of restrictions on what we can do with that data. But I think you'd be hard pressed in today's age to find a law enforcement officer that does not like body worn cameras. Another that came up, data sharing. What can be done to be more transparent with data? And there's a few things that I'm considering. What slows it down a little bit is I don't have a crime analyst within the police department, so I'm trying to learn that role a little bit. And then we're also switching our record management system currently. So I hope to have some reports written in a way to streamline these processes. But what I envision is probably quarterly, starting in 2021. I want to put on our website different types of data sets as it pertains to use of force. So after I started, I did have these numbers crunched. And out of all the total incidents that transpire, let's just say it was 14,000 calls for service in a particular year, 99.6% of those incidents result in no force being used, which is a good number for a police chief to see. And then breaking down those numbers further from there. So when force was used, what kind of force was used, and breaking that down further. And agencies have been compiling this data for many years. I think we are just now starting to see that information being readily available to the public and shared. Some agencies do it with more frequency than others, and I think that's variable on their record management systems and, quite frankly, their staffing. So I hope to have more information on that coming into the new year. Another one, just making sure that we're staying on top of our annual reports. For reasons unbeknownst to me that kind of fell off the tracks over the past couple of years here in Chaska. It's not necessarily because the information wasn't being compiled, because it is, but it's just making sure that it's getting into some kind of a format. And what will be important to me is making sure that that information is more consumable, because I've found that I tend to be long-winded, which maybe you can tell because I've probably been talking for too long already, but trying to condense that data down. And I'm really trying to embrace technology here and using these infographics and some other term I can't remember, and just trying to make it so somebody can look at a page and they can consume that information rather than having to read 3-4 pages. So bear with me on that, but I'll showcase something for 2020 once we get done with this year. And then another, social media presence, which I think our department does a pretty good job with, trying to keep interest. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but just trying to embrace technology, updating the public as much as we can with things that might be happening in the community. So transparency is a big piece. And what you'll find out of me is that I like to get in front of things, and I will share information with the public that we can. I won't be untruthful when it comes to facts. If there's something I can't share, it's a investigation is still ongoing. If data privacy gets in the way, but I wholeheartedly agree that this transparency piece is very important for that trust between the community and the police. And another, and I think this kind of, quite frankly, could encapsulate everything that I've mentioned, is just making sure that the agency is remaining progressive. Making sure that we're staying mainstream, we're staying viable, and we're revising and changing things as we need to. So, for instance, when it comes to a police policy manual, which we're pretty close to having completely revamped, the minute that you finish that, you have to start over again if you're remaining viable as a department. It's just like, when you buy a new computer, you take it home, you unpack it, you plug it in, there's already a newer one that's been made. And truly, you have to have that degree of dedication when it comes to law enforcement operations and policies and protocols, as they're ever changing. And it's really easy to fall into that complacency and the adage, well, it worked before, it will work tomorrow. That's not always the case. And it reverts back directly to the the need to co-police and listen to the community. If we're doing something that maybe has become stagnant or is not addressing a particular community interest, well, we need to reevaluate that. And I think, or I hope, that to eliminate things that I might or the agency might be blind to is collaborate. And again, I think this commission has that opportunity to do just that. I may look at an issue through a certain lens. Another individual might look at it through a different lens, but maybe we can come up with a good action plan for whatever that issue might be if we work together. So I know I've been kind of long-winded, so I think that's probably enough out of me, but if anybody has any questions, any feedback, I greatly appreciate it.
I've got some questions. Jen, can I go? Is it okay if I go ahead? Chief, first of all, I want to ask, you talked a lot about health and wellness. How are you guys doing? I know a lot of our neighboring jurisdictions are really short-staffed and have been hit really hard with COVID. We have a team that's still up and running and healthy?
We're very fortunate right now currently. So we've had a few occasions where we had to put people on quarantine for exposures, but fortunately they never became symptomatic, nor did they have positive tests. To date, I am the only individual of the department that has been positive for COVID, and I couldn't tell you where it came from. If it can get through a cloth mask, that's probably how it happened. But other than that, we are very healthy, we're viable. But I do have some contingency plans and some that I'm continuing to modify in the event that we do have a severe staffing shortage, just making sure that we have that continuity.
The other question I was thinking about is, you talked a lot about the community, the sense of community pride, and I think the fact that we have our own force is a source of community pride. We're the only one in the county that's got our own police force. I have a guess that relative to other cities our side, we're actually pretty lean and mean. Could you talk a little bit about when you think, because I hear all of the stuff about community engagement and mental health supports, and I think that's awesome, but that requires manpower. And I'm just curious about what our staffing levels are relative to other cities of our size.
Sure. Yeah, it's so hard to do, like a figure per 1,000, which kind of seems to be a standard that you hear sometime in law enforcement. And it's a tough comparison because each community is a little different. I think what we need to look at in Chaska, one is just the fairly large geographic size. Being 22, 23 square miles. That's a big area of land to cover, especially when officers might be tied up in other calls, and just the response time across the community. And then from there, you have to look at, the infrastructure. So we do have a highway that runs through, and, concerns that you might have in inclement weather, a medical center, quite a bit of retail space, maybe some more on the way. The density of housing you have to look at, are there areas where we might have increased medicals. So there's a lot of variables, but to answer your question, I really hesitate to put a number on it. But I think what we need to do as an agency, and this is something that, we're working with as a city, is to hopefully start increasing our shift minimum numbers is what we're looking at. And right now it's at a level of 2 officers is the minimum that can be on duty at any given time. And I would like over time progressively to either through adding positions or some other structural changes to get that initially to 3. But what hopefully will happen once the budget levy is passed is hopefully next year we will add another patrol sergeant to the police department. And the way that our department is structured is our patrol sergeants are on the street. They supervise the police officers, they respond to calls, they can do traffic enforcement. But to have that supervisory piece, I think is key, especially when it comes to responding to complaints, making sure that we are properly investigating and documenting use of force. But also what's very important is ensuring the supervisors have sufficient and thorough training when it comes to tactical response. So there's something that's called a tactical pause. And a lot of cops are really good at this. But what we see sometimes is in adrenaline type situations, especially maybe an inexperienced officer has this idea that they're just going to rush into something and solve that problem. And I can remember a few sergeants that I had years ago. They were so good at doing that tactical pause where you take a younger officer and just, you take 30 seconds or whatever time to develop a plan and to kind of lower that adrenaline as much as you can, so you can think your way through a lot of these, critical or complex incidents. So again, that's something that hopefully we'll be looking at next year, adding another patrol sergeant. But to answer your question, I would imagine, we'll take a look at the population of the community as it grows. We'll take a look at what other type of infrastructure or business comes into the community and look to increase that shift minimum, hopefully add some specialty positions and decrease that allocated time so we can allow for more engagement in the community.
Are there any other questions among the commission? Oh, sorry, Jen, didn't mean to trample on you there.
That's okay. I was trying to find my unmute button. So, I guess I just had a question about, you've talked about like your advisory committees or you're gathering together. And, we've just got done working on a basic outline of this as a commission. And I think that we would love to, engage more with groups and things like that. How do you see Human Rights Commission, some of the things that you're looking at?
Jen, you cut out a few times, at least on my end. So I think I got most of your question, but if I leave something out, please let me know.
I'm sorry, I have too many devices going at home right now, so my thing keeps going, your internet's unstable.
So no worries. In terms of the partnership, I think yet to be determined to a great extent. But what I think is most important, again, I mentioned, is looking at things maybe through a little bit different lens. And I fully recognize that sometimes, law enforcement or any profession for that matter, we can get kind of caught up in the routine in the way that we look at things and kind of what our paradigms look like. So if there's a way that, we can take an idea or a problem and look at it from some different perspectives, I think that's one big strength. Another would be trying to answer that question of how do we attract and sustain more community involvement? Because I've been to a lot of community meetings over the years, not necessarily here in Chaska, but the people that come to the table, they're usually the same people, and they're generally from the same walk of life. And how do we increase that? How do we increase that comfortability, get more people to the table? I don't have all the answers on that, but I think, whether it's, collectively through this group, or maybe we know some other people that we can reach out to, I think we can kind of forge a better path forward on that.
I noticed, Commissioner Carlson, you were raising your hand earlier. I don't know if you had a question that you wanted to offer up. You're on mute right now, so you'll have to unmute yourself. There you go.
I think I'm unmute now.
Yes, you are. You're unmuted. We could hear that. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, Chief, I wanted to thank you for sending out the Chaska community conversation. It was a great jumpstart for me to have discussions with my neighbors in my community, or my street, I should say, about your question of what does serve and protect mean? And so I wanted to thank you for doing that, but I guess then B, I just wanted to say and echo what Jen said. I think that our commission is willing to collaborate with you and look forward to doing that in 2021. How soon can we get it started?
No, I share the optimism there, and I hope we can do it sooner than later. And I think we're fortunate to have this means to do this remotely. which seems kind of a little bit as a foreign concept initially. We actually did coffee with a cop today for the first time on Zoom, which actually exceeded my expectations. But to answer your question, I'd say as soon as possible. One of the next things, perhaps that we could discuss is when I do have the opportunity to either create a annual report that will reflect what happened in 2020, or maybe getting that use of force data compiled and getting that shared publicly. I think what I'll do is I'll do a composite of the year 2020. And of course, those would be the kind of things that we could discuss right along with the strategic planning piece that I hope to engage with our department first and develop kind of an initial plan. And then again, I think that's a good way for me to compile that information internally and then share that to see if you would have any collective thoughts.
Are there any further questions from the commission?
I just want to say thank you again that we finally got to have you come to one of our meetings. I mean, it just hasn't been easy to get together, and I'm glad we could finally do it. I look forward to having you come and, speak to us when there's different issues or, even events that you want us to collaborate with you on. And so I really look forward to partnering with you in the future as a commission. So thank you.
Likewise. And thank you for having me here this evening.
And
Thanks, Chief.
Seibert, thanks for taking your evening to join us. It's been, I know you've been wanting to do this for some time, so I'm glad we were able to finally make it work and get you introduced to the Human Rights Commission. And I just want to say, I thoroughly enjoy working with Chief Seibert. He's brought a lot of great perspectives to the department and to the organization as a whole, as a city. And I think for our community is we stand to benefit from him being part of Chaska PD and leading the way, and hopefully for some time. So I also want to say that he stepped into a very challenging situation, having started with the department, I think maybe a week or two after we went into the initial full lockdown as a state. And he's been able to get his feet under him, and I think really get established well in a short amount of time. So thanks to Chief Seibert, and I think we can all look forward to working with him going forward here as a commission. And it looks like he may have froze while I was talking, or else he's stunned by the words I had to say, one of the two. So hopefully we'll wish him a good evening. It looks like he's gone. So you're not the only one with unstable internet, Jen.
oh, it's going around. I think we're all putting our computers to the limits these days.
Yeah, you're either catching unstable internet or COVID these days, I think, between the two. But
I'll take unstable internet.
all right.
Okay. Well, that was great to have Chief Seibert. We can't say goodbye, but I guess we do have one other guest in our meeting tonight. Ben, did you have something that you wanted to present during guest presentation?
No, I was just happy to be here. That was very informative, and I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us. You're welcome to stay to listen to the business part of the meeting. Otherwise, have a good night.
Yeah, no, I'll let you all be. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Okay, so now we will move on to item 4. We're on item 4 already. Okay. Has everyone had a chance to look over the minute last meeting? And Ellen, looks like you wanted to say something.
No, I was just answering yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, if anyone doesn't have any changes or additions, then I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Looks like Commissioner Carlson may have something.
Okay.
You'll need to unmute yourself.
How about if I just leave myself on unmute. I'm sorry, I can't find the exact page, but I made a note that I offered some congratulations to Auto Pros, PROS, and the city of Chaska for starting a program. It's under item 7, new business. 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down. It's Auto Pros is the name of the business,
Yeah.
and the city of Chaska.
Okay, so we need to, can you just clarify the change that's needed there? I don't know if I quite caught it.
Oh, okay. It says the Auto Pro City of Chaska Police Department collaboration. It's a collaboration between Auto Pros
Okay,
and the police department to do minor repairs of signal lighting that might be out on vehicles that are stopped by the police department.
okay. Okay,
I just want to say for the record, it's much less fun correcting minutes when I know that Nate's not responsible for the errors himself.
I will take responsibility because I need to review them before they get posted, so.
That's the only thing I saw.
Okay, we will make that correction.
Otherwise, I move for approval.
I second that.
All right, I'll do roll. Commissioner Bean,
Aye.
Commissioner Haga, Commissioner White,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunbar,
Yes.
Commissioner Spreadberry,
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Welvert.
Yes.
All right, the minutes have been approved.
Okay. And then Nate, can you give us a reminder of what that treasurer's report said again?
Yes. So the treasurer's report has not changed. So there were no new expenses and the balance remains at $1,684.94 for 2020.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on, we'll go to an update on the Martin Luther King Day event. Our committee met recently for that, and Nate prepared a report kind of summarizing what we've gotten some things that are confirmed, like some of the speakers are confirmed, and we've also gotten some really good possibilities in the works that we haven't quite gotten confirmed yet, but I'm really excited that we're including a lot of different groups from the community this year that haven't been a part of it before. So I'm really hoping that we'll be able to put something together that's really new and meaningful, even though it's going to be online this year. I think it'll be cool to try some new things. I did want to say one thing that wasn't on the report was the Human Rights Award. Next month at our meeting, we'll have to pick a winner. And as far as I know, I haven't gotten any nominations yet. So I would encourage you to talk to people you know and circles you're in and remind them to submit nominees. Also, as commissioners, we are allowed to make nominations. So even if you don't formally do it by next month's meeting, I would hope you could come with ideas that we could discuss at the meeting and to put in with any that are submitted in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would just to give a little perspective, I guess, on the nominations. I know the last 2 years we have been fortunate to have some outside nominations. You know, people put in the time and effort to submit that. But outside of those 2 years, I think it's been more common that we don't have nominations and that the commission identifies, you know, some ideas through discussion and comes up with an awardee. So I just say that to kind of, you know, help give you all perspective, because I know you've all been part of the commission for, you know, different numbers of years and may or may not have experienced the situation we're in right now. It's not necessarily uncommon. But I think, yeah, I mean, we should still work to try and solicit and hopefully get some nominations from the community. But, you know, if we don't, we can still move forward.
Sarah, did you have anything to add from our subcommittee meeting?
The only thing I wanted to share is that I reached out to the launch organization in hopes that one of their participants or more, or several of their participants could help us with providing a spoken word. And I use that phrase in lieu of the word invocation. However, I have heard back from Corey Magstaff today, who has respectfully declined the opportunity for clients to participate. So there are some suggestions about other individuals that we could tap to kind of set an opening remark. And they've included the former mayor of Chaska, Bob Ripke, perhaps the current chief of police that we heard from earlier in our meeting, perhaps the former chief of police. One of our local judges was suggested to me at my earlier meeting. So I think there's a list of possibilities. If any of you have some strong feelings or know of an individual who would be willing to offer a few words to us as we open the MLK program, if you'll let us know.
Yeah, and I think we have our next subcommittee meeting in a couple weeks. Is that right?
It's the first week.
So, yes, anyone has ideas of other, you know, things we should consider. We're kind of getting down to we were talking about at the last meeting. We're getting from the idea phase to the put it all into place. Because, you know, January 20th is not that far away. And so we're getting to the doing phase of things right now. So if you have ideas, send them our way now, or else they'll have to wait till next year. So that's just kind of a summary. If anyone has any questions, let us know. The next item is a discussion on the letter to the editor, which is kind of a communication that we were hoping to put out either in the paper or on social media or something. And remember, I gave everybody homework last month at our meeting. So I don't know if we want to just go around and talk about ideas. If it would be best if we email them to Kaylee so that she could kind of her ideas or.
Yeah, I'm going to encourage the commission to have a discussion in the meeting tonight and offer up your ideas. I think it would be helpful for Kaylee, as we've visited this topic a few times now. And I think what we'd really like to get to is some consensus on what are the themes and what are the main ideas that we want to try and get across in this message. And so that's going to require discussion amongst you to put some ideas out, because we need to know where the commission stands on this topic in order to put a message forward.
I think I worded my question wrong, Nate, because I think we should have a discussion too, but I'm just wondering, would it be helpful afterwards for us to send ideas to you, Kaylee, so that you have what we discussed kind of in a bullet form or something? Or
I am totally okay with us talking about it here. I can take some notes,
Okay.
and thankfully this is archived on YouTube and Chaska City channel, so I can go back if I need to.
great.
I did put together some ideas, so I got my homework done. Do we just toss them out? Okay. Again, I was thinking, what I'm understanding is that Kaylee, you're planning to write a letter that will show up in the Chaska Herald, talking to our community about the Human Rights Commission. Is that first, right?
So I think that's kind of for debate. It's been different things at different meetings.
Okay. So I have a
so,
bunch of
yeah.
things that may or may not apply to that. Something we might consider is perhaps offering an overview, a little bit of the Human Rights Commission's mission statement, certainly based on the new framework that we have. Providing residents information on the best way to contact the Human Rights Commission to either report human rights concerns or to offer ideas and suggestions to the Human Rights Commission. Maybe if we have formulated these, listing a few of the 2021 Human Rights Commission goals, encouraging residents to become human rights commissioners, including a link, or not a link because you can't do it in the newspaper, but a way for them to find the application to be able to do that. And seeking input from residents on projects that might meet the needs of our Chaska community. So that's what I had.
Yeah, I'd say Ellen did a better job summing up my thoughts than I could have done myself. She was absolutely nailed it there. I thought the same thing, visibility / our mission, especially since it's been redefined, accessibility, and then, open engagement. But Ellen's, I thought, was more thorough. So just co-sign it with my name and make me look smart too, please.
Well, wait a minute. I want to do my homework too. So, and I did. But Ellen, you hit all of the issues that I meant, that I wrote down. I wanted to suggest that we talk about our our revision to our strategic plan and our new goals. Ask for their community engagement, how encourage participation. And I do like the little history piece. That might be important for everyone to know, that we just didn't pop up during 2020 like COVID did. That we've been around, and that we strongly believe in engaging and having a community that's very diverse. So good job, Ellen. Thanks, Seth.
I agree with Ellen, and I think she has a lot of great things to say, and it seems like a lot for just a letter to the editor. But yeah, you raised some great points, and it's a lot more than I thought this letter was initially started out to be.
Isn't it going to be a editorial opinion thing, that not a letter to the editor, but an article?
Well, that's kind of up to Mark Olson to determine. And there is a 500 word limit. So
Right.
Set your expectations accordingly. I also wonder if there isn't, I've heard us talk a lot about bridging the divide in the community, in a space for people of different perspectives to come together and work to create a more welcoming community. And maybe that's a piece of this. I don't know.
I like that. It
Go
was,
ahead.
it sounds like more like an introduction, like here we are, we're here. Instead of a lot of detail, which they can find on our website then.
Do we have a dedicated email address? Like for people who wanted to contact the human?
Yes, right now on the webpage, it has my email address to contact on behalf of the commission. You know, if we were to do human rights commission at chaskmn.com, it would probably won't be one and the same anyway, because it would be directed to my email inbox. But I don't know if you feel that's more approachable, we could create something like that. But
I don't
there,
know. It's a great glamour shot of you, Nate. So,
What's
you know,
that?
I think the combination of the Nate glamour shot and email really sells contacting the Human Rights Commission personally.
Sure.
No, I think we've talked about that before at meetings, that I think community member, if I went to the website to contact the Human Rights Commission, I would feel better knowing that it went to a Human Rights Commission email account. Hey, you're a pretty important guy, and I know you get a lot of emails. So, I mean,
I'm not that
it
important.
well, I mean, you know, that's
this
not
stuff
your
might be
whole
personal.
job. And I thought it would be nice, like, I work at a church, and if someone was trying to contact the church about something, they wouldn't think, oh, I'm going to write to, you know, would write to the church for that topic or whatever. So, I mean, I think doing a, you know, HRC at the city email site would be just a really an easy fix, and would kind of seem to make more sense to people. They might not know who Nate is, and so they're like, well, emailing this guy. You know, I mean, of course, everyone knows who you are, Nate, but
No, not at all. But yeah, whatever feels most friendly, I guess, is fine by me. You know.
well, and I
Something
think then in the newspaper article or letter or whatever it is, saying, you know, that people can contact HRC at Chaska MN or whatever, you know, that would be an easy way, like if they had more questions, because we're limited to 500 words or 200 words. We can't get a lot of the stuff in there that we could. I think
Guest
the one,
editorial? Could we have the guest editorial? I think that is certainly more than 500 words.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting earlier, because you can write a whole column.
I have written columns for Mark before, and it's 500 words. So I think it's less than you think when it's in print.
Really? Because like Bob Repke writes in there quite often, Jim Wigan does, and
Yeah, I did it on behalf of
A
the
lot more.
superintendent several times, and he keeps it pretty tight.
stops you at 500. Huh.
Yeah, I also we don't have a whole lot of control of the Chaska Herald and how they want to put their material into their newspaper. And so the surefire way is to submit it as a letter to the editor. A guest column is typically, you know, like Bob Grepke and the others who do that on a fairly regular basis, that there's a relationship there between those folks and the Herald that sort of establishes them as guest columnists. Columnists. I'm not saying that right. But so there's a difference there. It's just important to understand that there's really not a whole lot of control that the city has over what the Herald puts in. And the best way to be able to get something in is to submit it as a letter to the editor.
one thing I mean, I agree with everything that everyone has said so far. Those were all on my list. But I really think that it's important to highlight we would like to hear from people in the community, what kind of topics and concerns they have, you know, what would they like to see for events or activities that we sponsor, you know, or could explore in the future, because we can sit and come up with ideas, but if that's not what is to the people in the community, then we'd be spending our time working on something that would be far more effective, I think.
Kaylee, do you have enough from us?
Yeah, I think so. I'll take a stab at it and get it to Nate and he can distribute it.
Well, I appreciate you, Kaylee, because this has been a long time coming that we're trying to use ideas together. So I hope that we've given you enough that you can work with, and I'm sure you're going to do a great job because you've done awesome work on other stuff. So thank you.
Or a ringing, or is it my computer? Or now I don't hear it, but
Yeah, I heard like
But it
a
comes
buzzing
on.
kind of.
yeah, kind of like I don't know, like an
I
alarm.
think it's okay now.
Yeah, it's like a feedback when you guys go too long without talking. Somehow it auto generates it.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
Oh, it's the aqua ringing thing. Okay. Anyone else anything to say for that? Otherwise, we can move on to item 7A. Okay. Next item is the Human Rights Commission webpage, and we kind of talked about that a little bit when we were talking about the email address, but I know Nate put together oh no, that's for the next thing. Never mind. The web page report that just kind of looking for some discussion about what we want to see on the web page, and also the discussion about the pictures, which I think is going to be a hard thing to do, of pictures of commissioners right now.
Yeah.
One thing that I thought of, Nate, we talked about it a little bit last time at the end of the meeting, is that there is the statewide discrimination helpline from the Minnesota Department of Human Rights.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something they said could be put on local commissions' web pages.
Mm-hmm.
For people if they've experienced or witnessed human rights violation,
Mm-hmm.
or if they have questions about human rights.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be a valuable resource to have on the webpage.
Yeah, and that's an item that Kevin Wright actually let me know this afternoon. He was able to get to and add that, so it should
Oh,
be.
great.
I'm just pulling up the page.
It's under the quick links, it looks like.
Yep.
Yeah, it's there.
So
Good. It wasn't the other day when I was looking at it to get
today,
ideas. So,
that just got put up today.
okay, thanks.
And it looks like Kevin may have changed the photo on there too. It's a photo of the commission presenting the award to Libby Fairchild last year at last year's MLK breakfast. So the photo's still maybe a little bit out of date because we've got a few commission members that aren't represented there, and at least one commissioner member in the photo that's no longer on the commission, but at least it's more up to date than what it was. So
I
And we
think-
I
look
think-
great.
Excuse me?
And we look great.
Well, obviously, yeah, it's without question. I think one of the things that I'm kind of interested to hear your feedback in is we've talked about, and this has been on a number of occasions and been alluded to on others, is having the Human Rights Commission page serve as a resource to, or sort of a connecting point to resources. And I think, one example would be the resources of the state Department of Human Rights, which is, what we added today. We're just talking about that. But my sense is, as it's been talked about, is that you have a broader vision in mind. And so I kind of want to open up that discussion and see if you've got feedback to provide to help us kind of think through that as staff. I also want to throw out that if we're going to go down that road, I think we've got to be very careful about defining what sort of resource makes sense to include on this page and what would not, because there are nonprofits galore in the world. And, some of them I think would be a very quick and easy, yes, that makes sense. And some of them maybe not. And they all have a different mission and different purpose. Some of them are tied to human rights. Some, I would argue, would use the idea of human rights to put their thing forward, but we may not necessarily agree with their angle or their approach. And that's where I think we get into murky water, where you start getting into a position where you would say, no, you don't belong here on our public, government website. As a resource. You kind of get into a little bit of a tricky situation sometimes. But if we're going to go down that road, I think we got to talk about what is our intention there and try to figure out, is there a way that we can make that happen in a reasonable way?
Well, I think that having links to things that pertain to the Chaska Human Rights Commission or the State Department of Human Rights makes sense. And if someone contacts us about a certain issue, whether they call or they email, then, we could talk to them about specific resources that might be into the situation, not necessarily advertising them on the website, but kind of keep a running list of places that that we can help connect people with.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you're thinking in terms of a running list of resources? I just get, and maybe this is redundant with what Nate was saying, like you don't want to imply endorsements of things, and so like state, like the report discrimination link to the Department of Human Rights at the state, I think is great. There may be some Carver County resources, that kind of thing. I just the further out you get, like CDA can connect people with a lot of different community resources from that perspective. The police department can. So
I guess, I mean, I wasn't thinking of like commercials for, or, like endorsements for, let's just use McDonald's and Burger King right now, for example. But I wouldn't say, oh, you need a hamburger, go to McDonald's or something like that. But I think we should have an idea of, like CDA, of community programs that we can connect people with, whether it's with the school district or with the housing or with, I don't know, a county commissioner. Maybe that would be where the issue would fall under or something. I think it's not necessarily good to pick one community organization over another in that situation.
Well, I guess I can say that if we're thinking about not on the website and having resources that people are aware of to refer people to, that happens pretty regularly. And you may just not be aware of it, but I take calls and emails frequently where people are looking for something, and I'll refer them to things that make sense based on their need. I know our front desk staff, the people who take the calls from the main City of Chaska line, get questions all the time from people who are looking for, you name it, and they're ready to point people in the right direction, whether it be within the City of Chaska as an organization, or it be maybe the county is more appropriate, or some utility contact, or it may be any one of our partners. And we also don't shy away from, if someone is needing clothes or food or whatever the thing is, we'll refer them to the local organization that does that kind of stuff. And so that information is known, and we have lists and contacts and things internally as staff to provide that direction to people. We don't necessarily put those things on our website right now because it's tough to maintain that information. It's tough to be comprehensive with all of that. And then you also get in those situations of, who's on and who's out, and how do you kind of handle that? So as a policy, we just stick to our contact information, and we're happy to help assist people and refer people as we understand their particular situation. We do it all the time.
I guess that was sort of what I was getting at. It's really hard to maintain, and it can get, if you have one site, then somebody's petitioning, you get another site on there. And so, I don't know if you had some specific other HRC websites that had pockets of links that you were interested in. I think it might be easier to go from something like that to see what, like, if there are specific examples. But as somebody who has to manage a website, I know how hard it is to keep it up to date. And whenever you add a link to somewhere, then somebody else comes out of the woodwork and says, can I get a link to this place added because you're linking to that one? And so given that we have a fierce but small team that manages that space, I just get a little worried about bloat.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, maybe, go ahead. Sorry.
I like the idea of having that referral list that currently the state office puts out for who to contact, but then also featuring on a monthly basis. We've talked about this before, the focus of the month, and whether that month focus would be on Indigenous people or well, just having a focus each month about the diverse members of our community.
Sarah, I love that idea, but who creates the content? I love that idea. I really legitimately do, but I don't know if anybody here has the capacity to drive that. And I don't know from a city staff perspective what kind of resources we could lean on there.
Well, I'd have to think about it.
Well, I heard Commissioner Haga make, I think, a pretty helpful, she put a pretty helpful thought out there, would be to maybe do a little bit of digging and take a look at different Human Rights Commission web pages that exist.
Yep.
Look at some of our peers and things like that, and get a sense of, what are we doing well, what are we missing, that kind of a thing. So I think that's something that I can take a crack at here between now and the next time we meet, to maybe give you all some ideas of things that I found, and things that we might want to consider, and maybe that helps to narrow this discussion a little bit further.
And I don't want to lose Sarah's idea, because I actually really do like that. And there might be ways that we can partner, like with the Historical Society and other folks, to do some features. But initially I'm like, oh gosh, how do we make that happen?
I know that's something that we've been talking about with our Parks and Rec staff in particular. Yeah. We've been trying to figure out, can we do events or something that align with, a lot of months are declared, month for a group or a cause or whatever, different things like that. And so are there ways that we can start acknowledging those things better and more regularly as a community? So there may be some alignment and things that can come out of that. I agree. It's a good idea. I think it's something worth trying to think about what's the best forum for that and what's the best way to get that sort of thing going.
I'll look into that also.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think this is helpful. I heard the desire to have a more dedicated email address. So I can take a look at that if we can get that created and what that takes. And then we can take some time and look at different Human Rights Commission websites and just get a better sense as to what they're up to, and I can share that next time.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to item B, which is a discussion about boards, work groups, and volunteer opportunities. I'm gonna let you talk about this, Nate, because it looks like you're looking for feedback from us before we start looking at working with other groups. What kind of information are you looking for first?
Well, in the strategic plan that was just approved by you all and also the council, one of the objectives or goals in there is to have, and I'm going to blank on specifically how we word it in the document, but the general theme is that, connecting more to the community. And one of those was looking at the themes of volunteerism. And we talked about, do we have a Human Rights Commission member maybe serve on a board or a commission that's with another organization in the community that has alignment with the Human Rights Commission. And so I think as staff, I'm happy to help foster those connections. I don't know that any of these other community groups are going to necessarily approach us, to ask for that. And so I think if we're wanting that, it would be useful, we're going to need to make that outreach and say, hey, this is something that we're thinking about, are you open to that idea? We have to foster those relationships to make that happen. But, before I go forward with that, I'd like to get some feedback from you all as to, do you have particular groups that you have an interest in? Who should we target with that effort? And I also don't know that we ever really came to a full resolution on, is that something, to what degree does this commission want to have that engagement? Does everyone want to have an opportunity like that to have a regular commitment, or is it more volunteerism as the opportunity presents itself, like the food distribution events as an example? Or maybe working with Julie Janke on some of her outreach kinds of things and supporting her in that way. Just kind of depends on the direction that you all want to go. I don't want to go and make an ask to a local organization about, involving someone from the commission if we're not serious about following through on that either.
Is that something with maybe a brand new faces of the commission next January, February? Maybe we hold off till then to see what the commission looks like then.
I mean, I guess from my perspective, I don't think the board piece is different. Like I personally think I would love to see more opportunities for us to partner with like Chaska Cares on the stuff that they're doing. And like partnering with Julie, I think is a really good intuitive fit for us to help with the community engagement pieces with the police department. So for me, it's where in the existing sort of city work can we fit in and support, and rather than, sort of external boards and that kind of thing.
I agree. But I also think about what other Chaska in May, Chaska in May, Christmas in May.
Christmas in May, sure.
That seems like a natural place for us to fit.
Mm-hmm.
That's heavily supported by civic organizations like the Chaska Lions, the Chaska Rotary, which seems like two organizations that we may have thought about working with, but certainly could do so in the future. Also, the Veterans Service Officer for Carver County, working with Beyond the Yellow Ribbon of Chaska. I think reaching into pockets of population that we haven't always heard from might be an excellent place for us to begin our discussions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And, you know, one way to do that would be to reach out to some of these groups and invite them to visitor presentations
Exactly.
for upcoming meetings. I think that might be one approach. So I can help with making those invites.
Right.
I think that when we invite the groups to speak about their group, we also ask them to think about, before they meeting, are there ideas they have of ways that we could partner with them in some way, or, you know, help out with some of the initiatives that they're working on. So, you know, we could see, is this going to be a good, does this make sense for us to be, they kind of feel like they've got it covered, and, you know, they're just there to let us know kind of more about their organization or thing. But I think it's a good thing for us as a commission to get to know that group, and then for them to kind of get to ask us some questions about what we would have to offer to their organization as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I can do some work to reach out to some of those groups, and, you know, certainly if you all have ideas or anything, you know, we can visitor presentation. I mean, anyone can make an invite, or, you know, to a group to come, and we've done that before. That's not really anything super new, but I think we just keep doing that. And it's good to know some of these groups that you've got particular interest in, so I can target those and extend the invite to them to get them sooner than later, hopefully. Okay.
Great. Moving on to other business. The only thing I have to say is a reminder that 5 commissioners are up for reappointment at the end of this year. And there are 2 alternate open spots. So if people are returning, or if they're just applying for the first time, the application's in by December 15th is they would like to have them by. And then just also get the word out, encouraging other people to apply from the community.
And on that note, I've made the decision that I am not going to reapply for next year. So there will definitely be another spot open come January.
Are we all frozen?
Oh.
No, I don't. I think maybe a couple were frozen there.
Did you hear, Judy? Did you hear me?
You're a little choppy there, Jen. I think maybe you're back now, though. So yeah, you might want to restate what you said.
Okay, I was just gonna say, are you going to be at the December meeting, Judy?
Yes, I plan on being at the December meeting.
Okay, great. I won't do a long, sad goodbye tonight then.
No. Well, I hope we get some good candidates between now and January.
Yes. Anyone else have other business? Okay, our next meeting date is December 17th, a week before we normally have our meeting.
Mhm. And for that one, I guess my thought, at least right now, and we can see if things change, but would be that it would really be a work session style meeting, because we'll need to really focus on determining a recipient of the Human Rights Award at that meeting. So that would really be what we want to dedicate our time to that evening.
Which means we would still meet this way, but it just wouldn't be broadcast.
Yeah, we wouldn't broadcast. We wouldn't post an agenda, but work sessions are open, to the public to view. So if someone wanted to join the Zoom meeting to just observe, that would be, something that we'll post is how to do that. But there won't be a formal agenda to work on that night. It'll just be really focused on figuring out, who we want to award that Human Rights Award to.
Okay.
Same time, 6:30?
Same time, 6:30. Yep.
All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion.
I second.
All right. I will do the roll. Commissioner Bean,
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Haga,
Yeah.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunbar.
Yes.
Commissioner Spreadbury has left us, so I presume he agrees. Commissioner Carlson
Yes.
and Commissioner Welbert.
Yes.
All right. Have a great evening.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye,
Good
guys.
night.
Happy
Stay safe.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.